Hi, welcome back everyone. This is the second video in our series of lessons on how to use the curriculum management program. We looked at 1.2.1 in our previous video, breakdown of syllabus content. We're now looking at 1.2.2, the breakdown of the learning outcomes for each module. When you go to your sequenced modules sheet, remember that each sheet is identified by the sheet tab at the bottom. While I'm here, if you want to change the wording of the sheet tab, you simply right click and you choose rename, and you change it exactly in the same way that you would change a folder name in File Explorer. Okay, so that's just something on the side. If you look at your sequenced module sheet, you will note that your modules under each block is linked. And I mentioned this in the first video, and they are linked to a sheet for each module that is described in a particular cell. There is an equivalent sheet, and there we have the little code KM1A. And let me mention this is in the guide. I didn't mention it in the first video. We have three potential codes for a module. KM, which is a knowledge module. Those are the typical theoretical modules that we would do in our subjects. Then we've got PM, which I have down here under my practical section, which is a practical module. And our third code is EM, which is an experience module. We won't have too many of those. This was initially designed in the field of adult education. And if you typically, and I think everybody's familiar with this, if you give people the theory of some or other module and you then lead them through the practice of it, let's imagine that you are training telesales operators, then you would obviously have to give them the theoretical module, then you'll have to give them the practical module, then you'll have to, under supervision, enable them to take a lot of calls. That's typically the experience module. In our world, I would imagine that in the sciences, in the lab, that would be the equivalent of teaching somebody the theory of an experiment under the knowledge module, then enabling them to do the experiment under supervision, which would be the practical module. Now, in order to get rid of the clumsiness that so often, comes along with doing something practical for the first time, you need to enable the learner to do this a number of times so that it becomes sort of second nature. That would be the experience module. If you look at some of our graphs in physics, what I found typically is you can explain to learners that distance equals speed times time, and they can get it. And then you can let them plot a graph and a distance time graph, and they may struggle, but they may get it. But typically, when you get to the exams, a couple of weeks or months later, you find that they've simply forgotten. And there one can work in an actual experience module where you need to give the child exercises, not to test them, but to simply acquaint them with a work to such an extent that it's really drilled into them. Okay, so those are your three modules. Now, enough said about that. If you hover your cursor over binary systems here, then it turns into a little hand which shows that it's linked. And we will look at the way to link cells with sheets a little later. At this point in time, it's already done, and the information is actually, it actually pops up in this little square over here. If you click it, it takes you to the same module, which in this case is your first theoretical module under block A, or rather under block 1. That's why it's called A. And you see this sheet For our purposes, we're only going to focus on this section of the sheet, namely the topic elements to be covered. Where do I find these? Well, in my case, I simply go back to the syllabus content that I used to find the module descriptors. Over here, the section, the subsection, and the modules. And very conveniently, if I page down, then what I will do, I think I just paged over it. There we are. I'll get to the subject content, and here I've got the section and the module, or rather the subsection and then the module. And here I get my outcomes. And there are 4 under binary systems. Again, I simply copy and I go click in the cell and I will paste. And then what I do, I take this verb and I boldface it. Okay, this verb I boldface so that I can see I've got to recognize, I've got to convert, I've got to show understanding, and I've got to use. That's very helpful. Please remember that these sheets are going to go to the students in order to orientate them and to assist them, especially our distance learners, regarding the entire program and the entire course map for the program. Okay, and that is why we want to make it as user-friendly as possible. So this is the second step. I populate my sheet with the outcomes over here. Once I've done that, I can go back. Now I can do the second one. Okay. Now I've already created a second one. In your module, there will only be a one sheet. So the question is, how do I create more sheets? What you do, you right-click on your existing sheet. You then say move or copy, because you want to copy this sheet. You don't want to redesign it. You've already got one that is designed. So you want to copy. And if you select move or copy, it gives you the option to move that particular sheet somewhere else or to create a copy. I want to create a copy. So step 2, I'm going to click there, create a copy. Where do I want the copy to be? In this case, I want it to follow KM1A. Just ignore that KM1B for a moment, because that would not be on your template. So I will click right there, and I will say OK, and it would have given me a copy. Now what Excel does, it gives the sheet the same name as the one that you've copied, but it puts a little 2 behind it in brackets to distinguish it from the previous one. If you delete the 2, you'll see that you're not allowed to do that. If I click enter, it tells me the name is already taken, try a different one. Okay, what you need to do is you've got to call it B. Got an issue here because I've already got a B. So let me just for a second do that. Okay, so what I would do there, you can also double click. You don't have to right click and go to rename. If you double click in a sheet tab, it's a quicker way to rename it. So I want it to be KM-1B. I press enter, I've got it. Now this is going to be an exact duplicate of the first module. What am I going to do? I'm going to go here and go to exit decimal. I'm going to copy. I'm going to do exactly the same. Double click. paste. I'm going to put represent in bold, capitalize it. Here's my first one. And so I am going to continue doing the same right to the end. Again, what do I do if I run out of cells? Everything comes across as bold, so I unbold, I bold show, I capitalize, and so I will continue doing. If I need extra lines, what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to select, click on row 29, I'm going to insert as many as I need. In this case, I have got under hexadecimal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I had 4, I would insert 2 more lines. And then, as I explained in the first video, the moment you do that, you have to copy the formatting of the row above to these 2. Okay, so it'll make a duplicate, and in the process, the underlying formatting of that particular row will also be copied here. So now you can carry on and you can put all your outcomes in these blocks. Right, how do I change the link? This is a very important question. If I go back to my sequence module sheet and now I click on hexadecimal KM1B, it's going to take me to KM1B. Let me just check. I might have changed that already before I set this up. But under normal circumstances, what would happen, if you go to your second sheet and you click there, it's going to take you to the first sheet. Because now remember, you haven't changed the link. You got to change the link to make it go there to KM1B. How do I do that? I right click, I say edit hyperlink, and it gives me this option. And now I'm going to click not on web page or file, not on email address, I'm going to click on this document. In other words, I want the hyperlink to remain in this document and go to another place in the document. This is very convenient, and we'll get back to this. Eventually, when you start putting your assessment questions and your tests into the system, you can put it in a single folder, and right here under web page or file, you can actually indicate where it's got to go to, which means that you can make a link from Excel to a test to see the typical questions, for instance, that you would want to ask and the typical activities that may be related to an outcome. Okay, so just keep that in mind. At this point in time, we're dealing with this document. So I click on this document. Where do I want to take the link? Yeah, KM1B. I say OK, and now if I click there, it'll take me to KM1B. Please note, if you add a link in Excel, it does what links do. It underlines it and it changes the font. Now, for our purposes, we don't want to do that. So the way to bring this link back to its original formatting as far as the font is concerned, we're working on Calibri 11, and it's not underlined. Remember what I said, if you want to select a cell that is linked, you don't click in the cell, because you won't go anywhere except to the sheet that is linked. You click outside the cell, you navigate yourself with the arrow. There we are. Okay, that's Calibri 11, that's remained the same. However, what it's done is it's underlined it. So you take the underlining away, and what you do is you restore the color to black. And there we are. Look at row 2, it looks the same. Okay, so manually, the moment you do a link, let's for instance, let's just do this with data storage. We've done C. Okay, data storage would be KM1C, so I double click KM1C. For those of you who are very familiar with the program, this might seem a bit long-winded, but I remember when I first started working in Excel, I really appreciated long-winded explanations. So I'm doing this for the benefit of those of us who are not familiar. Okay, so there's KM1C. I've changed it. Now I go here. I need to change the link. I right-click. I edit the link. This document, KM1C. Okay, let's test it. Click on data storage. It's gone to KM1C. Beautiful, right? Now, click outside. Arrow key to select. Remove underlining by clicking on it. And change color. And there we are. Okay, it's as simple as that. If I want to add a sheet without copying an existing one, then I simply hover over the little plus button, I click, and I've added a sheet. Now look where it's added a sheet, right in the beginning. Okay, this is a blank sheet, there's no formatting on it. How do I get it to go where I want it to be? I click, hold down, and I move. I've moved it to the end. How do I get it to have this nice blue color? I right click, I say tab color, and I select. Maybe I wanted to make it red. Now I've made it red. Okay, maybe we can change this to a practical module. 1A, that's what I would do. Okay, under normal circumstances, I would copy an existing sheet, but if I want for any reason to add a new sheet, this is how I would do it. If I decide I no longer need it, I would right click and I would delete it. I'm just saying that for the benefit of anybody who may want to do that. Right, I think that's enough said. There is one issue that I do wish to point out. We are not going to work with grade 8, grade 9, and grade 10 in one sheet. I've decided that is way too complicated. So we're making a single document. We're creating a single document for each subject. And what we will do, instead of trying to work with the different grades in that document, we will have a document for grade 8. So I will change these links, and it's very simple to do so. What I'm going to do for grade 8, I will simply have one icon. So I'm going to cut that one, click on 9, cut. Now I've only got 8 left. I want to edit the link, edit hyperlink. I want to take this back to the sequenced module sheet, and I say OK. This means that I've got a link back to the sheet. This means that if I click on binary systems, it takes me here. I can work and I can change everything I want to change, and then I simply click here and I'm back. In other words, it works like a website. Right, so you guys can do that. For hexadecimal, the same. You simply cut the ones that you don't need, and then 8, edit the hyperlink to take you to sequence modules. Now, if you click on it, it will take you here. And in this way, one can literally construct an Excel program that works like a website. The moment you get used to this, it is a most wonderful thing to do. All right, so much for our second lesson. I think this covers everything. And in our third lesson, we will go on to speak about the allocation of activities for lesson plans. Thank you so much for your time.